Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. In today's video, I will be giving you my top 5 transfer targets ahead of game week 10. Let's get into it. We're going to start with someone who is very fast becoming an FPL legend, following the same sort of mold as Lundstrom and Dallas. You can probably let me know down below some other budget, absolute legends in defense. Aaron Wan-Bissaka when he was at Crystal Palace at 4 million. There have been some great ones over the years, and Tino Livramento is definitely looking like he'll be remembered in the FPL history book for years to come. Up to 4.3 million now, rising probably again very soon because, my word, he is performing so incredibly well, not just for a £4.3 million defender, but for any defender. Another 9-pointer in game week 9, and lucky enough, I did start him, and I needed it because I was someone that didn't captain Salah, didn't own Foden, didn't own Mount, so I saw a big old red arrow, but luckily, Livramento made that red arrow slightly smaller. In terms of recommending him this week, I don't think you've missed the boat. I know a few people have mentioned, are we missing the boat? Now he's basically up to a 4.5 million. I still think it's worth bringing him in. And if you don't own him already, I think now is the time because they've still got quite a few nice fixtures ahead. I think if you wait until around game week 13, 14, as you can see the fixtures start to stiffen up a bit, then you probably are starting to miss the boat. But I just think he's so attacking. Southampton are sort of middle of the road, mid-table for expected goals conceded. So he's a decent defence, quite good attacking output, or at least he's passing the eye test and he's getting into good positions. And I just think you could definitely do a lot worse. And like I said, because the fixtures coming up, it's brilliant. You can either put him first sub or you can start him. I've been starting him in a 5-back formation. And I started him up ahead of both Saka and Armstrong. And obviously that worked out well for me in game week 9. So don't be afraid to start these budget defenders, especially when they've got Watford, Villa and Norwich in their next 3. If we take a look at his underlying statistics, projected points wise, not that high, but sort of what you would expect for a cheap defender playing for an average team. Expected FPL points per 90 from the first 9 game weeks is sitting at 4.36, which is really, really good considering he's not a premium defender and he's not playing for a premium team that are likely or expected to keep a lot of clean sheets. 1.45 touches in the box doesn't seem like a lot, but that is actually pretty decent for a budget defender. And 0.12 expected assists. Once again, obviously that's nowhere near the likes of Trent, who tends to hover around 0.4 expected assists. But that's still pretty impressive for a player, once again, not playing in a premium team, but he's still getting forward a lot. Non-penalty expected goal of 0.06 isn't anything to write home about. But that puts his expected goal involvement per 90 from the first 9 game weeks at 0.18, which I think is really impressive for a £4.3 million fullback. As you can see by his touch map, this is probably the thing that makes us so excited. This is when we watch Livramento, we think, oh my God, he looks like the sort of player that's getting into those positions. He looks fantastic. And that is basically demonstrated with his touch map. It almost looks like a right mid as opposed to a right back. Very, very impressive. What I would say, I'll try and remember to flash it on screen. Someone said that the touch map on Twitter, when I posted this on Twitter over the weekend, said it actually looks like a goat. And I'll try and remember to flash it on screen because it was absolutely hilarious. But towards the attack, you can see obviously the 2 like antlers or horns or whatever it's called on a goat. And you can see almost the goat's face and the goat's legs. Absolutely brilliant. But he is very, very quickly becoming the GOAT of FPL at the moment, if we forget, obviously, Mohamed Salah. So, listen, I think most of you already own Livramento. But for those of you that do not own him, bring him in. Don't be stubborn about this. It's definitely worth a transfer if you've got one hanging around. Obviously, if you're struggling with free transfers, I don't know if it's a priority, but I can't see a better 4th or 5th defender in the league at the moment, and I would just bite the bullet and bring him in. If you've been watching this series for a while, you'll know that I don't just recommend players that have scored well in past game weeks. Often I actually try and find more differentials that haven't scored well in the past game weeks. But sometimes we do have to acknowledge if a player's just scored well and they've got great fixtures coming up, their confidence might be high. The underlying statistics are really good for them. Sometimes you just bite the bullet and bring them in. And the first 3 players that I'm recommended in this video all performed well in 9, but I do think that those returns will continue in future game weeks. Just quickly before we continue, last week, I can't remember the exact 5 players that I recommended. It was Chilwell, James, Callum Wilson, Jamie Vardy, and Broja, the Southampton cheap £5 million forward. 4 of those all got attacking returns. Obviously, Chilwell and James were great. Wilson scored a goal and Broja scored a goal. And unfortunately, Vardy didn't go very well. But we got 4 out of 5 last week. The week before that, we got 3 out of 5. So we're doing really, really well with our suggestions. So this week, the second player that I'm recommending is Mason Mount. Now, yes, he did get 24 points, a hat-trick and an assist. And no, I'm not calling myself a revolutionary for recommending him this week. The reason that I do still think he's really worthwhile is a couple of reasons. To start with, I do think that he will be very, very nailed for future game weeks. Now, Obviously, it's difficult to tell completely with Tuchel. The reason I say that is Chelsea switched to a 3-5-2, which meant that either Mason Mount wouldn't play or he would play as a number 8 alongside like Jorginho and Kovacic, or Kante and Jorginho, or something like that. He would play in central midfield, but we know he's much more effective on the right wing. So in the absence of Lukaku and Werner, Chelsea switched from a 3-5-2 back to a 3-4-3. Mount played on the right wing for the majority of the 7-0 game against Norwich, and he was absolutely excellent, and he's so creative. And I just think that Chelsea looks significantly better in the 3-4-3. Now, Thomas Tuchel's a significantly better coach than I am, but I assume when he watches, he can see what we all see, in that Chelsea just look like a better team in the 3-4-3. So I think even when Lukaku and Werner are back, I still think Chelsea will play the 3-4-3. And I think when they do, Mason Mount is by far and away their best right winger, and he can play on the left as well. So I think he should be fairly nailed. Fixtures coming up, I would say that if you're going to bring in Mason Mount, you've got to do it this week. Newcastle and Burnley, the next two, are really, really nice. I don't think Leicester United, Watford and West Ham are bad fixtures, and Chelsea's nice fixtures actually continue up till about game week 20-ish, and then they start to get really tricky. So you could hold Mason Mount for 10 game weeks quite easily, but I do think you want him in for that Newcastle game. Newcastle continue to be one of the worst defences in the league, so definitely bring him in this week if you want him. He's already risen back up to 7.5 now, which is the price he started at. He's been brought in by almost 500,000 managers at the time of recording. By the time you see this, it will probably be 500,000, and he might go up to 7.6 million. Stats-wise, they're actually really good, and of course, this is massively boosted by the Norwich fixture, so do bear that in mind, that this is skewed by that absolute mauling of Norwich at the weekend. But 6.73 expected FPL points per 90, absolutely top-notch. That's not only because his attacking threat is really high, but also the clean sheet point as well. 4.83 touch in the box, which isn't terrible, but it's definitely not elite. If you look at even people like Adama Traore or Mbeumo, they're getting more touches than that in the box. So I'd say you want sort of 6 or 7 to look at sort of an elite touches in the box, but he's not that sort of player. You know, he can drop deep, he can shoot from outside the box, he can create from around the edge of the box as well. So 4.83 touch in the box is decent. 0.43 expected assists is very high. It's one of the best in the league. He's very, very creative. That's what his biggest attribute is. And that's why I expect Thomas Tuchel to continue to start him. Non-penalty expected goals of 0.28, which again is pretty good considering his main threat isn't through goals. It is indeed through creativity, which puts his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists at 0.71 per 90. That is highly impressive. And again, that is skewed by the Norwich game, but his underlying statistics have always been pretty good. And even before, I brought in Havertz and captained him. Feel like a bit of a plonker for doing so. But even before, Mount's underlying statistics were better than Havertz. So perhaps it was just a poor decision. Yes, Havertz is playing in the false 9 and his stats are better in that position. But Mount is the consistent one. Mount is probably the more nailed one long term once Lukaku and Werner are back. And once Lukaku is back, I expect his expected assist to only continue even further to improve. So I think I might have made a mistake going for Havertz. If I was making the decision again, I'd probably go for Mason Mount. And I think if you do have a spare slot, maybe you want to move off of Jota or Greenwood, I think Mason Mount is a great shout for game week 10 and beyond. Again, I do promise that I don't only use the metric of last week's points to make these videos and to make these decisions. But again, Phil Foden's someone that I've been looking at for a while. I know a lot of people say this, but I did almost put him in on my wildcard, but I decided to go for Heung-min Son. He then got the COVID and I panicked and put in Mahrez, and it's just been going downhill since then, because then I moved from Mahrez to Havertz. And really, if I'd have just stuck with Phil Foden the whole time, I'd be significantly better off, and I'd have saved 2 free transfers as well. So big mistake on my behalf, but it's not too late for those of you that have a structure where you can bring in Phil Foden. Again, if you're moving on to someone like Paul Pogba or Bruno Fernandes, maybe Rafinha's injured. Again, at this stage, I don't know the extent of Rafinha's injury. But if you have a route to Phil Foden and Mason Mount, I think you've got to take the punt on one of them. I actually probably prefer Phil Foden. We're going to get on to why. Fixtures-wise, we've had the Chelsea-Man City debate previously in previous videos. I would say that Man City's fixtures over the short term are slightly more difficult. Palace is fantastic if he starts. United, Everton, West Ham, Villa aren't quite as good as Chelsea, but they're still... Again, I've said this in the past, I don't like saying players are fixture-proof. I'm not even sure that it's the players that are fixture-proof. I just think that Manchester City can score against anyone. They can keep clean sheets against anyone. So if you're picking a player from City, I think it probably doesn't really matter too much about their fixtures. But what I would say, from game week 16 onwards, Man City's fixtures are absolutely brilliant. They're some of the best in the league. So you've not only got him for these pretty decent fixtures coming up, you've got him long term as well. And the other thing about Phil Foden is he tends to start the difficult fixtures and more likely, if anything, to be benched in the easier fixtures. Lately, he's just pretty much started everything, a bit like Cancelo. But I think if he is going to start some, it's going to be the Manchester United. I'd bet a lot of money that he's going to start the United game, probably the West Ham one as well, Villa too. I think the trickier fixtures actually suit Phil Foden. So I wouldn't be put off by the fixtures at all. You can see the statistics are actually better than Mason Mount, and that's one of the main reasons I would go for him, as well as the fact that I think Man City's attack is better than Chelsea, and as well as thinking that their long-term fixtures are better, the underlying stats are slightly better for Phil Foden as well. And I just think he's more of a direct goal threat, whereas Mason Mount, I know he scored a hat-trick at the weekend. That's not going to happen again. I'll put my money where my mouth is. I doubt he ever scores a hat-trick again in his career. Now he's going to score a hat-trick in game week 10 and someone's going to clip this, but he's just not a massive goal threat, Mason Mount, from open play. I think that's the first goal he scored from open play since, I think it was April or May. So I know there hasn't been that many games since then, but he's not really an open play goal threat. Phil Foden is. So Phil Foden, you can see 6.84 expected FPL points per 90. That, again, is higher than Mason Mount. 7.92 touches in the box. Was Mason Mount's, I think it was like 4.68 or something. So almost double Mason Mount's touches in the box. Expected assist 0.27, which is good, but again, he's not as creative as Mason Mount. But that non-penalty expected goal of 0.54 per 90, that's higher than Jamie Vardy. That's higher than the likes of Jimenez. He's performing like a striker, and yes, he has played in the false nine as well, but he's also played on the left. It doesn't really matter where he's playing. He's a massive goal threat, and he's very, very direct. That puts his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists at 0.81. So he's approaching a stage with his underlying statistics where he's almost expected to get an FPL return 1 per game. Apologies. So it's difficult to choose between the two. If you don't own either, I think Mason Mount is potentially slightly more nailed, like long term, but I think at the moment you can't drop Phil Foden. So I think if anything, Phil Foden might be more nailed over the short term. Chelsea's fixtures are slightly better short term. City's are better long term. Phil Foden's underlying stats are slightly better, whereas Mason Mount's is slightly worse, but they're both pretty impressive. So I think if you own one, it makes the decision easier. If you don't own both, I think I would personally just about lean towards Phil Foden, but I also like Mason Mount as well. The life of a content creator is that sometimes we have to make videos when we're not 100% sure on news. It's happened in the past with like Lukaku before the Champions League. So unfortunately, this is the only time I can record this video, and it is late on Monday evening. At this stage, I don't know whether Bryan Mbeumo is injured. Well, I know he's injured, or he picked up a minor injury at the weekend. I don't know if it's going to keep him out of the Burnley fixture. So apologies if by the time this goes live or by the time you watch this, he is ruled out. If Bryan Mbeumo is ruled out, it makes the decision really easy. Go for Ivan Toney. I think you've got to have a Brentford attacker for these fixtures coming up. They look so good. I do think that if Bryan Mbeumo is out injured, it does make their attack in general slightly weaker, but I still think you've just got to attack those Burnley, Norwich, Newcastle fixtures over the next 3. So, assuming Bryan Mbeumo is fit, again, if he isn't, bring Toney in and you can end the video now. If he is fit, I just wanted to make a little bit of a comparison between the two, because I know a lot of people don't own either, and they're not going to use 2 transfers to bring in 2 Brentford players this week. So it might be that you bring in 1 now and then 1 in 11, and you want to know who to prioritise. So obviously the fixtures are the same for both. Burnley, Norwich, Newcastle are the ones you want to target, but I do think you could keep these players for Everton, Tottenham, Leeds. I don't think you want to keep them for much longer than that, because the fixtures do start to go downhill a little bit, but they're not terrible after game week 12. So I'm not necessarily sure this is a 3-week punt. I think this is potentially a player that you can hold for 6 to 10 game weeks, and that you can rotate with other players in your team. If we take a look at the underlying statistics, obviously Toney is nailed, and when I say nailed, he is about as nailed as any player can get in the Prem. He's going to get benched now like Armstrong. Last time I recommended a nailed striker, it was Armstrong and he got benched, but no, there's no chance of Toney getting benched. They just don't have the backup, and he's so talismanic for them. So he's played 810 minutes, i.e. 90 minutes in all 9 games. Bryan Mbeumo has essentially been nailed. He's come off early a few times. Obviously, he came off early in game week 9 due to his injury he picked up. He's played 742 minutes, so both are nailed when they're fit. Projected points-wise, Fantasy Football Fix has Toney slightly out on top. That's probably due to expected minutes, potentially the penalties as well. As we can see in a bit, the stats are fairly close as well. So Toney just about comes out on top if you're trusting the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm. Expected FPL points wise, Brian Mbeumo just about comes out on top. And the main reason for that is probably the extra point for a goal for midfielders and also the extra point for a clean sheet. Because once again, the stats are fairly close. So Brian Mbeumo, expected FPL points for the first 9 game weeks, does just about come out on top. Non-penalty expected goals and expected assists is identical for both, 0.44. Now, you may be thinking, in that case, Raptor, why have you put Brian Mbeumo's in green? The reason for that, not only because he's a midfielder, so he gets extra points for a goal, but also because most of Brian Mbeumo's non-penalty expected goals and expected assists is made up through goal threat, whereas most of Ivan Toney's is made up through assist threat. So Ivan Toney's non-penalty expected goals, I don't have it actually in front of me, is around 0.15, so it's very, very low, but his creativity makes up for that. It's around 0.3. It's pretty much the complete opposite for Brian Mbeumo. Very, very low creativity, but very high goal threat. So for me, if I'm going to choose a player, I'd rather the one that's scoring the goals than the one that's creating. So that's why I do think that whilst their expected goal involvement is identical for the two, I do just about prefer Brian Mbeumo. What I would say is Toney is on penalty. So here we're looking at non-penalty expected goals, but Toney has had a penalty, and penalties do count. They're still FPL points. So that might make then Toney just bump up a little bit, and you might therefore say that Toney's expected goal involvement is probably a little bit higher when you take into account the possibility of a penalty. Big chances wise, Mbeumo almost has 3 times the amount Toney has had. 0.61 per 90 for Mbeumo versus 0.22 for Toney. This just goes back into the idea that Toney is creating chances for Mbeumo. We've seen a pretty similar dynamic with Hwang and Jimenez at Wolves, where Hwang, the cheaper player, is finishing the opportunities that Jimenez, the more expensive player, is creating. So it does look like Toney is creating more chances for Mbeumo, and Mbeumo is getting more of those big, clear-cut chances. I think he had 1 big chance at the weekend once again. So he gets into really good positions. Touches in the box, very, very similar. Both around 4.5, and Mbeumo just about comes out on top. Looking at the touch maps, they're actually occupying pretty similar positions. They both drop deep and left quite a lot, but I would say that when I watch them at least, Toney tends to be the one that drops deep, holds the ball up, and Mbeumo runs in behind a little bit. So I think I would still just about, if they're both fit, just about prefer Brian Mbeumo, just for the extra point for the clean sheet, which I think is quite likely in the next 3 games. Even long term, Brentford look pretty solid defensively. Extra point for a goal, and I would say that he's getting more big chances, more clear-cut chances in that Brentford team. But Toney is talismanic. Toney plays every minute, and Toney's on penalties. And his stats are still very good as well. It's a tough one. If Brian Mbeumo's injured, then I look like a bit of an idiot for making this section, but I just wanted to cover it just in case he is deemed fit, because I think he's still a fantastic option. I myself own both of them. I'll probably just bench Mbeumo unless he's out long term, in which case I'll probably have to sell him. But I just think I want both of these long term. That's why I included them both on my wild card. If I had the choice again, I'd probably still just about go for Mbeumo, but I love Toney as well. So guys, there you have it. Those are my top 5 transfer targets ahead of game week 10. As I said, we are having some major success in this series so far. I don't think there's been any weeks where we've struggled to hit any. Last few, we've basically had 7 or 8 out of 10 from the last 2 weeks. So hopefully that continues, because I own Mbeumo, I own Toney, and I'm looking to bring in some of the other guys as well. So hopefully that does continue. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel and you enjoy these weekly series and also our daily price prediction videos, then please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help support the channel grow, and it's absolutely free. Also, if you want to get access to any of the stats that I've used today, or any of the touch maps, heat maps, etc., then you can do so by heading over to fantasyfootballfix.com or by downloading our free app and enabling push notifications. But until next time, guys, thank you very much. Bye-bye.